It's actually been shown by anthropologists that probably the biggest factor in your sense of well-being is your body's chemistry. So when you're triggered and angry, you're not very happy. And so, but since it's a strong survival response, you just can't will your way back into a positive thing. So one of the first things you have people do is simply remember why they're together. When were things fun? How do you create an environment that's just flat out fun? And it's a learned skill. Because remember, the default skill is survival. So actually create I call it learning another language, and the language is called, quote, an enjoyable life. To learn skill, you have to train your brain to be less reactive. So the metaphor I use is that if you want to learn Spanish, you'll go to class, you'll read the books, you'll practice, you may immerse yourself in Spanish. Let's say you can now speak fluent Spanish. What happened? Your brain changed. So you can now speak Spanish. But you didn't learn Spanish by trying not to speak English.
The Vidal Speaks Podcast.
Episode 121, Dr. David Hanscom, Taking Your Life Back and Moving On Happy and Healthy, Part 3. Welcome to Vidal Speaks. My name is Deborah Vidal, former 11-year LPGA golf pro turned classical homeopath, certified plant-based nutritionist, and wellness coach. Each week here on Vidal Speaks, we bring you knowledge, inspiration, or natural remedies to help you take charge of your health and feel your best. I believe health is freedom and knowledge is power, so tuning in each week will give you the power to take steps towards freeing yourself from the chains that hold you back from having the energy to do all you want in life. No matter where you are in your journey of wellness, Vidal Speaks can help. I promise. Hey guys, how are you? I've missed you. I know it's been a while, but please stay tuned because I've got a lot of coals in the fire going, and I'm doing my YouTube videos. Are you guys watching? I've got more to do of those. Of course, I get things that I hear in the news and I get emails and I say, okay, tonight I got to do a video, and then just stuff happens, it's just life. And this time of year, it's even crazier, it seems, but I sure have missed talking to you on my podcast. So I'm really happy to be back here today with the part 3 of the David Hanscom interview. I sure hope you guys have enjoyed this series. I have. And I know it sounds like I do a lot of these kinds of things with David because it's really seemingly on the outside like it's helping people with pain syndromes, but actually this is stuff that is so helpful to improve all of our lives. It's really about improving our relationships. When he talked last week about the family rules, that's so important for all of us to know those kinds of things, because you have a partner or a wife or a husband, and 2 years it's going by good, 7 years it gets a little, maybe you take each other for granted, maybe you have some things you're bitter about, maybe you're not communicating as well. And so little things start creeping up, and sooner or later, you guys aren't doing so good. And when you learn things like I learned last week, I think those are just really good foundational rules to have in every relationship. And then the other stuff he talks about has a lot to do with people with anxiety or anger or fear. But who doesn't have those kinds of things? Those are human emotions. And I think, especially in today's world, with all the violence out there and all the lack of connection we have among each other in the world, I think it's really, really important to understand this stuff. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this series and that you can use this work even if you're not somebody that has a health problem or a condition or a pain syndrome or whatever it is, back problems. It doesn't matter, because honestly, this stuff is just about learning how to be in touch with your inner self, how to become more connected to the person that you really are, because we're not our bodies. We're more than that. We're not our syndromes. We're not our cancer. We're not our migraines. We're not our pain syndrome. And I think when we learn to do his work, we can be in touch more with the joy of our life and the joy of who we really are and who we are really meant to be. So I really love talking to Dr. David because he's so enlightened, and he just he just makes it simple. And even though I think it can sound simple, sometimes those simple things are really hard to put into place in our life because habits are strong. And sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing something because it's just the way we look at the world. If we're used to looking at the world with orange colored glasses, then I think it's going to be difficult to change that because that's just been our viewpoint for a really, really long time. But sometimes the best thing to do is just not to put any judgment on a person or a view, but that's really, really hard. I work at that really hard, but it's hard to do. So anyways, I'm looking forward for you guys to hear the interview we did today. This one is my favorite, partly because it's the really positive one, right? It's about how to now take your life back and get moving forward. And the other stuff was laying the foundation for the rules and, why we have things and what physiological things are going on when we have problems like migraines or anxiety or anger. But today, there's really a lot of talk about how to take our life back and what we can do. And I love focusing on the positive. You guys know that. I'm an optimistic person, even in today's world where it's really hard to be optimistic. So I don't want to wait too long and keep you guys back from hearing this interview because I was really, really excited to do it. And I'd like some feedback. Let me know if you've enjoyed this series. So send me an email anyway and say hi, or if you're liking the podcast or if you have any ideas. I'm looking forward in the beginning of the year to talk more about either how to get well through these kind of emotional things we can do, getting in touch with the true spirit of who we are to our soul. I'm also looking to interview some raw foodists, some fruitarians, some people that have healed themselves on the fruitarian journey so you can hear what they did. So I'm really looking forward to 2019. It's going to be a good one. All right, you guys, before we get going, let me just tell you a little quick something about Dr. Hanscom. Dr. Hanscom is an orthopedic complex spinal deformity surgeon who now understands that most chronic pain from any source is solvable, usually without surgery. He is the creator of the DOC, Direct Your Own Care program, which is the subject of his book, Back in Control, A Surgeon's Roadmap Out of Chronic Pain. Through his own personal ordeal, he discovered that chronic pain is curable by systematically using established medical practices in a self-directed manner. The key is to connect to your own capacity to heal. And yes, you guys, that is the key. We need to connect to our own capacity to heal. And as patients apply Dr. Hanscom's DOC program, the results are often miraculous. Not only have hundreds of people become pain-free, many of Dr. Hanscom's surgical patients have opted out of surgery after trying the program for only a few weeks. The key to alleviating chronic pain, Dr. Hanscom discovered, is the patient's control of his or her own treatment plan. He didn't always believe this way. He spent the first 8 years of his practice willingly performing spinal procedures to cure his patients' discomfort until research data revealed that the overall success rate for surgery performed for low back pain was less than 30%. Today, Dr. Hanscom's mission is to reintroduce true healing into medicine. He feels that doctors should be given the time to understand their patients and their life situations surrounding their medical problems. All right, you guys ready? Let's go talk to Dr. Hanscom. Hey, Dr. Hanscom, welcome back, and thanks for doing this 3-part series with me. It's been really great, and I'm excited about today's. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And of course, I always enjoy talking to you. It's nice talking to somebody who has lots of understanding of what we're doing. So that's great.
Well, sometimes lots of understanding comes from either lots of pain yourself or living with other people. But either way, it's a gift, I can say, because it has taught me so much. And your conversations with me are as interesting to me too. So thank you so much. And I'm so excited about today because I want to speak about taking your life back and moving on into your new life. Up until this point, we've been talking a lot about anger and anxiety and how we get stuck in those and all the family rules. And today is kind of the positive part about what we can do to move on into our new life. But before
Right.
we do that, maybe can you just do a little recap of the last two sessions or just this process, and then we'll start with this part 3.
Well, I think the essence of the issue with the family is that the neuroscientists have a saying that neurons that fire together wire together. In other words, if you have pain, of course, you have anxiety and frustration as a survival response. And if somebody threatens you physically on the outside, you also have anxiety and frustration as a survival response. So any threat is met with a chemical surge of adrenaline, cortisol, and histamines and other stress chemicals. So what happens, you have some type of threat, either mental threat or physical threat. Your body secretes the stress chemicals. Then you take evasive action to avoid the problem. The problem that humans have as far as threats compared to other animals is that the mental threats, in other words, thoughts, concepts, create the same chemical reaction in the body as a physical threat. Humans can't escape their thoughts. So if you have an unpleasant thought or you're angry or frustrated about your boss or your kids or your spouse, your body has the same chemical response. But since you can't escape your thoughts, it's a sustained response. So what happens is that all of us have unpleasant things happen every day. We can get frustrated, which again, your body's full of stress chemicals. But when those stress chemicals are sustained, it changes your body's chemistry and also affects each organ separately. There's over 30 symptoms of a stressed nervous system, stress body, adverse body chemistry. And at the worst part of my chronic pain episode, I had 17 of these at the same time. So it was like migraine headaches, ringing in my ears, burning in my feet, insomnia, anxiety, back pain, neck pain. So each organ responds in its own way. But when it comes to pain, it doubles the nerve conduction, so you feel more pain. So remember, again, anxiety is a sensation generated by the body's stress chemicals. And when you're triggered, in other words, anytime you're anxious or frustrated, we call that a trigger. In other words, the current situation reminded you of something from your past, and we're geared towards avoiding danger. So something in your past was dangerous. If something similar occurs in the present day, then your body secretes chemicals that help you to survive. So, for instance, I had a very abusive childhood. That's no secret for people that have read my book. So, if a certain person resembles the tone of voice of my mother or situation, whatever it is, I have PTSD. I mean, my body reacts really huge reactions, and those are permanently embedded pathways, permanently embedded reactions, and it's a big problem. So, bottom line is, your body is designed only to survive. It is not designed to have a good time. Then again, neurons that fire together wire together. So the problem is with families is that you have family patterns that are passed on to you, and then they play out in your new family. So the last 18 months, and this is not in my book, this is on my website. It's actually going to be the topic of my third book about chronic pain in the family, is that the strongest triggers in life are your family. And it's ironic because you love your family, you're connected, you have a life together, all sorts of common interest. And there might be 100 things that are fantastic about your relationship. There might be 5 things that aren't so great. But what disrupts your relationship is a neurological trick because, again, your father and mother were probably not perfect, even the best of families. And when you're with your partner or spouse, they may say something or do something that wouldn't affect me, for instance, at all. But all of a sudden you find yourself really triggered. And all of a sudden you're anxious and frustrated and reactive. And the key issue about this anxiety stress reaction is a million times stronger than the conscious brain. That's why you can't talk this stuff out. Mm-hmm. So you can't talk it out. So what happens, you have to just stop. So we've talked about this before about the rules of engagement, that in your household, you simply never argue or fight. It just goes outside. So what you're going to do is it's like 2 boxers in a ring where the referee separates them from clutching each other. And if you get angry at your partner, then your partner has to leave because the person that's angry is not going to leave. So you literally just have to break it up like now. So there's a bunch of rules in the family that are on the website. It's under stage 1, under your family. Click this link to begin your healing journey with your family. So I don't want to go into that too much today. So
yeah, we spoke about that last time too,
right.
which is really important. And I know, like you said, the family are such triggers. So it's really, and it's something I want to say that it applies to everybody, because this is work that you're doing because your job is working with people in chronic pain. But the truth is that we all need these rules, and that, as you were mentioning last episode about how many people have anxiety or just anger issues. And so this is work that we all really need to do. And that's what I was really excited about your work. It's not really only for pain people, right? It's for people who, there's so many people I know with anxiety issues and even just anger issues alone, because the world is just getting more angry, it seems. So this is such great work. But I want to ask you something, because I think the physical body, and since you're a medical doctor, if we think of it as a machine or like a mechanical thing, the thing that's very elusive is the nervous system. You can say, okay, there's a liver and there's kidneys and adrenal glands that sit on the kidneys, and then there's a brain, and we have a blood system and blood vessels. But I think most people don't really understand what the nervous system is, where it is, what it is, and what it does. So can you give us a little very simplistic explanation of what the nervous system is?
So the nervous system regulates every function in your body by the millisecond. In other words, it dilates blood vessels, it constricts them, it makes your stomach move faster or slower, it allows your bladder to empty, it allows your eyes to dilate or constrict, it regulates your heart rate. So not one thing happens in the body without the nervous system controlling it, not one thing. So basically, it's a unit. In other words, you can't have a nervous system without a body to support it. So all the supporting structures you talked about are really just an adjunct to the nervous system. So really what the human system is a nervous system that's supported by the body. Then remember, the nervous system is designed to survive. So as my friend Dr. Luskin wrote, who wrote the book Forgive for Good, the human organism, or any living organism, has one function, and that's to survive. In other words, the species through millions of years that survived was on alert for danger. The species that wasn't alert actually didn't survive. So it's actually survival of the most anxious, not necessarily survival of the fittest, even though that's part of the equation also, but clearly survival of the most anxious. So what the nervous system doing through all your senses is you're processing sensory input, vision, touch, taste, smell, and you're automatically in a range of behaviors that's neutral. In other words, I'm sitting on a chair that's comfortable, the room's fairly comfortable as far as temperature, etc. So your nervous system keeps your body in a range of behaviors that's comfortable. Now, your nervous system may want to seek, the beach, warm sun, and feel relaxed, and so then you feel a step above. But since the nervous system is looking for danger, what the nervous system more often does is that you're on high alert. If somebody says something that's threatening, or there's something physical that's threatening, again, you can't escape your thoughts. Your nervous system tends to be on high alert, which changes the body's chemistry. So what happens is that we have a sustained stress response. Again, every organ just responds in its own way. And again, anxiety is that feeling generated by body stress chemicals. So it's primarily a result of unpleasant sensory input. It's not the cause. So it's not primarily a psychological problem. The reason why it's so critical is this unconscious survival response is 1,000,000 times stronger than the conscious brain. In other words, as I'm talking to you, I'm not adjusting my mouth muscles. I'm not changing the shape of my tongue. My body's doing that automatically. When I look to a dark spot versus a light spot, my pupils are dilating or constricting. I'm not thinking about that. So if you think about it, the nervous system essentially does everything. That's it. And the analogy I used to you before the show started was that if you think about flying a Boeing 740 jet without a computer, it's not possible, right?
Right.
So, but if you didn't have a jet to support the computer, that wouldn't work either. So I think the separation of the mind versus body has been a huge, huge disservice to medicine in general.
I
And is
agree.
simply a unit response. And just one more example really quickly, there's 80 billion nerve cells in the brain. So the nerve system is intertwined, but the cell bodies of the nerve system happen to live in the brain. But those nerves are throughout the entire body. So for instance, in muscles and tendons, there's 1 million pain fibers per square inch, a million. There's 50 trillion cells in the human body. So it's unbelievably complicated. I mean, what would happen if your nervous system didn't regulate your heart rate?
Yeah,
Wouldn't
right.
work.
And so, Dr. Hanscom, is the nervous system then found only in the brain? And I know there's two parts, the central nervous system and the autonomic. So when you're talking about this malfunctioning, is it of one of those systems?
Everything's just every millisecond is just one unit. In other words, again, in your muscles, there's 1 million nerve fibers per square inch, just pain fibers, by the way, not other fibers. So what happens is that your nervous system completely intertwined with your body and vice versa. So the cell bodies happen to live in the brain, but that's it.
I see.
So if you stripped away every cell in your body of muscles, tendons, and ligaments and bones, you would almost look the same. I mean, 1 million fibers per square inch is a lot, and that's just the pain fibers. So it's just one intertwined unit.
Wow, that's so impressive just to understand the body, how complex it is. It's so cool. So that's a very easy thing, and when you understand it like the Boeing 747 with a computer, then it makes a lot of sense to those people who are mechanically minded and maybe not so imaginative or, science minded, because I think a lot of people want to understand something more mechanically. So that was good. Thank you. And so now we'll move from there and we'll go on about just speaking about, I'm personally really interested when you talk about moving on into your new life, about how one can dig deeper into their spiritual journey to free themselves, because so much of healing comes from emotional healing and spiritual healing, because as you said, everything is all together. You can't really separate it. So what would you say is the first step then for people moving on?
So one of the 4 rules we talked about as far as families is spending an hour remembering why you're together. When were things really, really fun? And remember that in detail, conversations, attitudes, dreams, etc. And what happens is that you're trying to wait. It's not positive thinking, which I don't like, is actually positive substitution or reconnecting with what is. So I want to go to a metaphor I think might explain this really well and explains the spiritual journey, is that what you're doing, there's 2 things you're doing in chronic pain. You're using mindfulness-based tools, relaxation tools that decrease your body's adrenaline and cortisol and histamines. In other words, there's ways of calming down the body's chemicals just to feel better. It's just stress chemical drops, anxiety drops, the pain drops. So what you're doing, so conversely, if your body's full of oxytocin, the love drug, dopamine, the reward chemical, serotonin, which is antidepressant, and the GABA drugs, which are like Valium. In other words, when you're at play or have perspective and relaxed, contrast in your mind that chemical bath compared to stress chemicals. So when your body's full of stress chemicals, you're alert, you're hyper, you're agitated. It's not a very pleasant way to live your life. And so essentially your sense of well-being in life is really based on your body's chemistry. So again, when you're full of stress chemicals, life's not so great. It includes pain. And when you're full of play chemicals, why, it's incredible. And it's actually been shown by anthropologists that probably the biggest factor in your sense of well-being is your body's chemistry. So when you're triggered and angry, you're not very happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But since it's a strong survival response, you just can't will your way back into a positive thing. So one of the first things that people do is simply remember why they're together. When were things fun? Because as again, couples trigger each other, and when you suppress a trigger, it's just bad. When you have the trigger, it's just bad. So you have to learn how to process the triggers so you don't stay triggered very long. So what happens is that we talked about the rules in the family, about simply not fighting or arguing in the house, not talking about the pain, etc. But the next step beyond that is how do you create an environment that's just flat out fun? And it's a learned skill. Because remember, the default skill or default language is survival. So to actually create I call it learning another language, and the language is called, quote, an enjoyable life. To learn skill, you have to train your brain to be less reactive. So the metaphor I use is that if you want to learn Spanish, you'll go to class, you'll read the books, you'll practice, you may immerse yourself in Spanish. But in 5 years, what happened to your brain? Let's say you can now speak fluent Spanish. What happened? Your brain changed, so you can now speak Spanish. But you didn't learn Spanish by trying not to speak English.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was a deliberate act that I'm going to train my brain to learn Spanish, or, I have endless admiration for your golf skills. I tried for 20 years to play golf and couldn't do it. So I don't know how you do this, by the way, but nonetheless, your brain learned how to play golf, right?
Yeah, you on some level, that's for
Right,
sure.
right. Okay, so then take it back to chronic pain. So you can't come out of chronic pain by trying not to be in pain because your attention's on the pain. So what you're doing, the more you try to fix and solve chronic pain, just like trying to fix or solve your English, you're not going to learn Spanish. Same thing with chronic pain. By trying to fix your chronic pain, you're not going to learn how to be out of pain. So
That's
what
a
you're
very
doing,
good analogy. I like that one.
right? So the language you learn is an enjoyable life because remember the default language is survival, right? So as you get older, that default language becomes stronger and stronger. So people tend to get more anxious as they get older. But what you do is you train your brain to actually have a good time. So you can't solve chronic pain by trying not to be in pain. You solve chronic pain by literally developing a new nervous system. It's like a virtual desktop on your computer of good food, good wine, good friends, a religious experience, if you wish. I call it the spiritual journey of just getting your perspective back. But again, since your brain is focused on survival, you have to cultivate that. And as you cultivate it, just like learning a new language, your brain actually physically changes. So things that used to really irritate you and frustrate you, you don't want to suppress it. In other words, positive thinking is a disaster. It actually fires up the nervous system more. But as you cultivate a different response to that same stress, you realize, guess what? This is not my mother. And you just become aware of that. And you drop your shoulders and you learn to actually literally be with your pain. I call it the ring of fire. Then your body's chemistry starts to drop down. And then even if you don't feel like it, if you just discipline yourself to sit down, have a cup of coffee, go on a date, watch a good movie, read a good book, just little things. And then sometime between 3 to 6 months with our couples, we say, okay, look, you're out of the hole. Your pain's much better. Your family dynamics are much better. By the way, we've had the best time with this family situation. You can't imagine what we're seeing with the family dynamics. It's been unbelievable.
I believe it because I know so much how this is such a big trigger for people. So I can imagine how much success you're having with that.
And it's 100%. 100% of people, I swear to God, fight. If you tell me a couple that doesn't fight, they somehow learn to live separate lives and live in the same house, but they're not actually connected. So I don't care if you're off the street. I don't care if you're a billionaire. Everybody triggers each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is this survival reaction, and people get really frustrated because they have all these logical, wonderful things together. So it's actually a neurological trick that drives couples apart. I wrote a website post called Happily Ever After. And look, you like each other, you have things in common, you have friends together, you've developed a life together. And then somewhere between 5 and 10 years, things start to get strained. It's like a reverse magnet.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this unconscious response is a million times stronger than the logical brain. And you cannot talk this stuff out. You have to just stop. So right now, my wife and I are working on this with success. I would say it's taken us a year. I only figured this out about 2.5 years ago. And so I'll have to admit, she's better at this than I am. So when I get triggered, it's not great. And my Hoffman teacher basically pointed out, look, you get a chance to be triggered too. In other words, you're still human. Just because you teach it doesn't mean you don't get to experience it still. But she says something that triggers me. And my Hoffman teacher points out really clearly, it's me that got triggered. It's not her. I want to blame her. But guess what? It feels like her, but it's actually me that got triggered. It has nothing to do with her.
Yeah, but that's that when you're at that place that you can realize that, wow, you've really become aware and made a breakthrough. And that's what changes everything is the awareness of knowing that. Because I can experience that. And, you know, there's so many times people say, you know, you made me angry, or you know, it was because of you that I was late, or because of this. And really, when you think about it, I always say, no, you chose to be that way. Nobody makes you anyway. You still have free will, but it's such a great, powerful place, even though you say to me all the time, I still get triggered even though I've done this stuff. But think about how different it is now that you know that. I mean, what a powerful tool just to
Right.
have the knowledge, right?
Right. So, see, the tricky part is that you don't want to suppress the triggers. In other words, that's a disaster. So pretending to be happy when you're really angry is a huge problem because it really, really fires up the body's chemistry. So we know when you suppress thoughts, you think about them more. When you suppress emotions, especially anger, it's even worse. So I thought I was pretty cool, but I was having 16 different physical symptoms. So even though I successfully suppressed my anxiety, and I basically disguised my anger in forms of perfectionism, being judgmental, being right, all sorts of crazy stuff. I was angry. I was really, really angry, but I had no connection to it. And I
Mm-hmm.
honestly didn't understand the effect of my body's chemistry. So anyway, the bottom line is in the family is that it's a 100% chance that your partner is going to trigger you. So I have a little mantra now I've come up with the last few months is that don't take action when you're in a reaction. No action in a reaction. So you allow yourself to react and you learn to quote, be with your pain, be with your anger, and then it'll pass. It always passes. It might take 5 or 10 minutes, it may take a half a day, whatever it is, just zip it. Just don't say a word. And so I call it another term I use is called the ring of fire, is that there's just visualize a circle with three sections, with the outer ring being blue, which represents fun, accomplishments, experiences, friends, family, etc. And the middle ring is the red ring, which is anxiety, frustration, discomfort, etc. Then the green ring is the center where things are just quiet, contented. And really, the one state of mind that's the most powerful is just simply being contented with what you have right there in front of you, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what happens, we spend a lot of time, in fact, I was very, very successful at this, of staying into the blue ring. I was a surgeon, I was smart, I was personable, all this stuff that kept me in the blue ring, and I was pretty darn good. So I actually didn't hardly sense anxiety or frustration because I was so busy being busy. But as the anxiety pathways became stronger and I became less successful in suppressing those, I became totally encompassed in the red ring and I couldn't get out of it. And finally, I just totally burned out and there was nothing left. So by default, I ended up into the green ring. I mean, into the center of the green.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do it that way. You start training your brain to be okay being anxious and frustrated. In other words, it's okay to be anxious. It's okay to be frustrated. I mean, if you didn't have anxiety, you'd die, right? If you didn't have anxiety, you would not survive.
Right.
So you can't control it or get rid of it. That's not going to happen. And same thing with anger and frustration. I mean, in other words, sometimes you need to be angry to survive and take care of yourself. So those aren't things to get rid of or solve. The bottom line is you learn to be comfortable with them, but don't take irrational action to people when you're angry. In other words, no action in a reaction. So going forward to the family issues again, to the positive mode. So you're in the center, right? So somehow you learn to process anger and anxiety. You're not as reactive and you can just be. So when your family triggers you, you've learned just to take a deep breath, walk out of the room, whatever it is, no action in a reaction. But the next step beyond is creating an environment, I call it another language, which is the language is an enjoyable life. So that means things like having weekly family meetings, with an agenda. And you might have family members rotating through the agenda and say, well, what do you want to do this week? I mean, what can we do in our family proactively to have fun?
Yeah, and
Pick up a
that's sad that you have to think sometimes that you have to plan for fun, but I get it. And that's where all the things that you've shared with me, that's really the one place that's really given me the big eye-opening thing about it. It's so true. And life, I see in many of my family members around just how hard they have to work, some working two jobs and still barely making ends meet, and how little time there is for fun, even doing nice things like, if they want to go to a gym or take a swim or whatever. There's so many things and people in the world that are just so busy and their plate is so full, and you really, really do. Even if you have the time, I have learned from your work that you have to make plans to have fun, because that's what I'm getting more and more, is that's the one, if you want to call it mechanical thing, it's not just an elusive thing, that you really have to try to sit down and speak with each other and make plans to do something that's fun, to reconnect, and I don't know, program your nervous system into something other than pain or whatever it was programmed before.
Right. I mean, your brain changes structure every second. Every millisecond, your brain's changing structure. So what happens is you cultivate this part of your brain that is enjoyable. First of all, the way the human brain develops actually is around play. I mean, watch kids at play, right? Look at kittens and cats and dogs and whatever. When they're young, they play. So it's that every living creature has a sense of play. It's actually part of the development. So you don't have to make it up. It's actually already in there as part of your inherent nature. But remember, the body's default language is survival, and the play language is in there, or the spiritual perspective is in there, but it gets masked by the survival set of reflexes. So so two things: you reconnect with what is. That's why spending at least an hour, maybe more frequently than that, of just when were things fun? Why were you together? Because when you're triggered, that's so powerful that you tend to label that person as this, and this. Well, anytime you label anybody, and this comes out of this book by DeMello, The Way to Love, is that anytime you label anybody or any situation negatively or positively, you simply projected your view of the world onto that situation. You've completely lost awareness. And what blew me away about his book, it doesn't matter whether it's a positive judgment or a negative judgment, it's still judgment. So we go back in a conversation, the key to the situation is awareness, right?
Right.
So, and I'm going to mention the Hoffman process just for a second. Hoffman is a 7-day process. It does about 5 years to this in about a week. And it's about family patterns that get passed on to you that you pass on to your kids, but they play out in your family. So you don't talk about the past. You become aware of these family patterns. So you have to become aware of what is. In other words, what's the default survival language for you before you can create the new language. So what they do is they don't talk about your past. They don't analyze it. That just reinforces it. But you become aware of how those patterns are playing out in your life. Then you create an alternative reaction. So instead of being stress, automatic survival response, you create a little bit of a space between the stress and the response. And in that space, you create a different response. You visualize a different response, just like an athlete learning a skill. So it's an extraordinarily powerful process that I use pretty much every day, more now than I did this 10 years ago. I just went to a refresher course about 8 weeks ago. I've had 6 of my friends go in the last 3 months. And what it does, it's an integration process, and it reconnects you. In other words, you get to feel. You get to feel more negative, and you get to feel more positive, but you get to feel.
Mm-hmm.
But the beauty of it is there's a language that develops that you get to see your partner separate from his or her patterns. In other words, when somebody irritates you, there's a tendency to label them, correct?
Right.
So
sure.
what happens, I think the beauty of this, first of all, with Hoffman is structured, so it is the people heal each other, essentially. But second of all, which has been most powerful for me, instead of labeling my wife as this, and this, inconsiderate, she's whatever, we put these labels on people, but I can now see my wife as a person who had patterns programmed to her by her parents. And when she's in a pattern, that's not who she is. That's not her. So if nothing else, that process absolutely transformed our relationship. She and I talk about this all the time. We honestly would not be together without the Hoffman process. Couples can survive 5 or 10 years without those tools, but it's a different language, but it's hard to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a learned skill. We have some weeks and months that are better than others. So Hoffman doesn't promise an eternal life of happiness. It promises real life. You just connect with what is.
Mm-hmm.
So we realize when we're triggered. I can be judgmental. She can be judgmental. So then I watch myself being judgmental about her being judgmental, right? It makes no sense.
Yeah, right.
Right? Okay, so I can just see her as a person, and I can let these patterns go, but just separating the patterns from the person is extraordinarily powerful. And I don't know any other venue that actually does that. So going back to our family discussion, when your spouse or partner triggers you, you get to just first of all understand it's you, not them. In other words, you take full responsibility for being triggered. Second of all, you realize that this person is not who they are. This is a pattern programmed into their brain. And fortunately, both of us went to Hoffman. My wife actually went first, and then I went about 6 months later, not because I wanted to. I was not going to buy off on this stuff. But I just decided empirically, since she had done it, I should just do it just to get the same language.
Yeah.
And then it's been a huge process. So it's allowed us to do, instead of being trapped in this cosmic ping pong game of pattern versus pattern, we're able to de-energize them. I'll use that word. I'm not sure what the right word is exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can just have fun. You can't really have fun if you're fighting these massively powerful survival reactions.
If you're living your whole life as your story from the past, I mean, you're not
Right.
living life, that's for sure.
Right.
Time to take a little break and walk around and do some movement and get a nice piece of fruit or a big glass of fruit juice or just a pure glass of distilled water, whatever it is that you want. But take a little moment here to stretch and move around and then come back and join us because I want you to listen to the rest of this great interview. I love this one. So you guys, it's December and it's the holiday season. And if you are somebody that needs to buy some gifts for people, then I'd like to ask you to please use my Amazon banner. You can go to my website, it's vidalspeaks.com, and you can click on that Amazon banner and you can shop right from there and just bookmark that and put it on your bookmarks bar and use that banner whenever you buy anything from Amazon. You guys know I'll love you forever for that, even though I love you already now. And lastly, I just want to ask you if you can, and you can help to support the show, you can either make a donation also on my website, or you can go to patreon.com and help me out that way. But whatever you can do, I would so appreciate it. And please, you guys, share the show, pass on this episode to anyone you know that needs some help, either with just bringing back their joy into their life or because they have anxiety or pain or some health issue. Just share this podcast. There's so many episodes that can help people. So please be sure to share it. All right, you guys, I love you. And let's get back to finish that interview. Tell me, does the Hoffman, I know you said 5 to 7 day seminar, is it all over the world? Is it only in one location? Is it only in the United States? Where can people find out more about how to do Hoffman?
So it's just Hoffman process. The headquarters are in San Rafael, California. I think there's 3 in North America. There's one in Connecticut and there's one in Napa Valley, which is the main one. And they also hold them up in Vancouver, British Columbia. They have 14 other centers around the world, like in Brazil, Australia, England, Italy, etc. And it's a 7-day in-house process. It starts Saturday morning at 9 o'clock and ends the next Friday at noon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an in-house process. And literally, they do about 5 years of my work in about a week. But it's focused on the family patterns. And for instance, I never would have written the book without Hoffman because one of my strongest patterns was procrastination, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, the behavioral patterns always win. It's a 1,000,000-to-1 ratio of the unconscious brain versus the conscious brain. So just because you don't want to procrastinate doesn't change the pattern, right?
Right.
So once you understand where the pattern came from and how powerful it is, and again, not perfect. Again, emotional perfectionism is also a pattern of mine. So you get to process them all. And so as these patterns come up during the day, as you become aware, and the key to the situation is awareness, not fixing, it's awareness.
Yeah, that's what you're really getting to today. I think you've said it all along, and I love that book by DeMello with It's All About Awareness. Beautiful little book. If people don't have it, they should get it. I'll put the link in the show notes, but it's just so cool. I like to just open that book up randomly and read a page and get a beautiful message. But It truly is about awareness, and it's easier said than done, but the more you do the work, the more it just keeps bringing you back to just be
Right.
aware. Just, it's so easy to put labels on anybody, no matter who you are, whether they're positive or negative, and we get out of the ability to just be, and then you get out of touch of who we truly are, and what our true selves really are. So that is, I hear it more and more from you, and I get it more and more about this idea about awareness. It's kind of like when I learned yoga in the beginning and how important breathing was, and then being an athlete, how important breathing was, and then 10 years later you go, wow, now I really get it, because it's just you can go deeper and deeper into learning to become more aware. And I think it's not easy, but it's a process, and you got to start somewhere. And this is what your work does. It gives people steps that ultimately they become aware. And if you can become aware that you're triggered, if you can become aware of your patterns, if you can become aware that you're living your story right at the moment, then what a gift, because awareness is the first step to step out.
Right. Yeah, you can't do anything. I mean, you can't solve a problem that you don't know exists. I mean, what's sobering to me post Hoffman is I spent my entire life is one big massive trigger. I mean, I was frustrated, I was angry, I was self-righteous, I want to solve the world's problems. I mean, it's extremely sobering to me now is that I get triggered, and they're pretty intense reactions beyond words. And so the problem with the triggers, they're so powerful that even though I've been doing this for years and I spend most of my time not being triggered now, it's how do I describe this? It's like I go all the way to the concrete floor. I mean, a trigger is a 1,000,000 to 1 ratio, and I get smashed to the ground. It's brutal. And my Hoffman teacher pointed out and said, look, you're human. When you're triggered, you're triggered. You can't stop it or control it. You just can't do that. So it's very sobering for me to realize how triggered I was every second of my life until well, actually, I'd done a lot of work before that, so I probably wasn't triggered all the time, but I didn't know what a trigger was. And by the way, let's talk about PTSD for a second. Is that what PTSD is? That you have a hyperactive reaction to something in your past, right? So PTSD actually responds to these processes. But see, with couples, in a way, being married is like having chronic pain, because you have all these things in life that are good, but your brain focuses on the negative, and it's the repetition. And what happens is these survival circuits outweigh all the beautiful things in a relationship, and you have to become aware of what's going on. And then again, going back to a concept of a new language, is good food, good wine, good friends, remembering why you're together, choosing to have fun. And he also mentioned work about having 2 jobs. Well, if you're at work 16 hours a day, 2 jobs, which is it's brutal, no question about it. So it's hard enough being there doing the job, and the data shows that 70% of Americans dislike their jobs. So I went through the phase myself in multiple different scenarios. Is that, okay, I'm here. So maybe it's not the first choice of what I want to do, but guess what? If I'm going to choose to remain angry about it the entire day, that's not great, right? I had a friend of mine so what happens, that's where that sense of play comes in. Okay, I remember I used to actually, when I was a teenager and in my 20s, I was a construction worker. And part of my job, of course, is digging ditches for footings for foundations. And somehow a light bulb went on in my brain that I'm going to just dig the best ditch ever. And it completely transformed the experience of ditch digging. Same thing with the jackhammer, same thing with pouring concrete. I became very good at all this stuff, and I became a great ditch digger. So if you make a choice that I'm going to play at work, I'm going to play at play, I'm going to simply do the best job I can do right here in the very second, because there's a tendency, well, I'll work 8 hours and go home and have fun. Well, why not enjoy what you're doing while you're doing it?
Otherwise, your amount of work time is going to be way more than your play time. So you might as well teach yourself how to have as much fun as you can during your work hours.
But then you come home and get triggered. So how does that work? That's even worse,
then there goes your play time.
Right. So then it's brutal, because what happens, the triggers are actually worse than hating your job, because they're deeper and they're more powerful. So you're trapped by your job, and now you're trapped by your family circumstances, but you have a complete choice. You can remain angry. at work or at home or both, or you can choose to enjoy them both. And just again, that choice changes your body chemistry in an extraordinarily powerful way. So then your sense of contentment, well-being goes through the ceiling. It's not about being happy. It's more about being centered, grounded, and contented.
Mm-hmm.
And those are different words than happy, which I think happy, by the way, is a pretty deadly word.
Mm-hmm.
But awareness and experiencing is a lot different word than happy, right? So, and that's a whole different conversation about the deadly word of happy and self-esteem. Those are really deadly words because they're intellectual means to deal with these unconscious survival circuits. So going back in the conversation from the very beginning, there's a book. Have you heard of this book called Sapiens by chance?
You were telling me about it.
I mean, I don't have the book in front of me. I would love to read this one paragraph. But we point out for millions of years that, quote, our happiness probably depends on how content we are. So if you're a hunter 5,000 years ago and went out and got your animal to bring home for dinner and sat down by a fire, had a dinner with your family, and were relaxed and contented, that person is probably as happy back then as we are now when we're happy and contented. So really, he points out very succinctly, which I thought was brilliant, that your sense of well-being on this planet really depends on your body's chemistry.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And there's something, a lot of what you've been talking about, I had mental questions I want to ask you, and a lot of the things that you've been talking about has been going through all of those. Like, for example, when you talked about learning to be comfortable with the uncomfortable emotions, you've talked about this in the past episodes. But another one, and since we're on this idea of play and reestablishing new neurological pathways, you talk on your blog a lot about when you're engaged with your true value system, it's probably the most powerful way of creating these new neurological pathways. So when you say your true value system, when you're engaged in this true value system, is that the idea of play, or can you maybe define that a little more?
Well, I mean, to me, I'm not defining play as just doing fun things to avoid the pain, because the pain is still running the show. So as you learn to be comfortable with uncomfortable feelings and you quit reacting to them, you're paying less neurological attention to them and you're not reinforcing them. So going back to the new language analogy is that you learn the new language, the language of survival starts to atrophy because you're not engaged in those as much. So it's like you haven't played golf for a year. You still have golf circuits in your brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're not as good. Same thing as these anger anxiety circuits. As you use them less, they start to atrophy. And as you use these other circuits more of cultivating play, and to me, it's like gratitude, awareness, curiosity, contentment, just things reframing. In other words, I'll tell you one story. A friend of mine is a physician, and she would get out of her car every morning, and she said the first step she took onto the curb, she had the automatic thought about how much she hated hospital politics and how she hated her job. That's not great. And it's not a great way to, so reframing about, I'm fortunate to be able to help people out. It's a different story than I hate my job, right?
Right.
So that context in of itself makes a huge difference. So yeah, reframes. For instance, I had another friend of mine who is a dentist up in Canada, small town, and he sort of hated the small town, and the practice wasn't thriving, and he just was sort of unhappy about the situation. And I saw him about a year later, and he was happy as could be, and the practice was thriving. And I'm going, what happened? Because he's been a couple of years just being sort of miserable, and he made a statement that I just decided to enjoy my practice. Mm-hmm. And of course, it built on itself we talked about the mirror neurons effect before, is that his patients are happy, your staff is happier, he was happier. And eventually he sold the practice and moved back to where he wanted to live in the first place. But he was happy then, he was happy in his new place. So the key issue is, I don't like the word happy, is getting connected and content with what you have right in front of you at the very second you're in.
Right.
That to me is actually the essence of play.
So does that mean then when one moves from distracting themselves from the pain to being engaged in their true value system, does that mean that they're just learning to be happy or satisfied or involved in a good way in what they're doing in the moment? Is that what you mean when you say or I'm just trying to really understand maybe what the first step is, because in the beginning, I think people try to do what you're saying and they're just distracting themselves from the pain because they need to, like I remember you telling Lloyd, just live your life regardless if you have the pain, just live your life. And that was a big thing for Lloyd that really helped him, because up until that point he was sitting in a chair and feeling like he couldn't do anything, and of course then that makes you feel like the victim, and then you're angry and you're trapped and the whole thing you talk about. But when you told him that was a big thing for him, he just started getting up and just living his life as if he, of course didn't have the pain, but of course you do. So I'm just kind of always wondering when people get stuck like that and they know what the next step is, because they say, okay, Dr. Hanscom said that I need to, be more engaged in my true value system and I need to live my life regardless. But in the first beginning, it may feel like you are just distracting from your pain and you're not truly doing it. So I'm just wondering, like, is there a first step or some pointers that people can know how to truly be engaged in their true value system and what that is?
Well, what I suggest is, as you know, there's many layers to this. None of the layers are that complicated, but the whole system in place is complex. So I would recommend looking at my book, Back in Control, A Surgeon's Roadmap Out of Chronic Pain. And what it does, the book's just a book. It doesn't give you the solution, but it gives you a framework of saying, well, this does this does this. And then the website, backincontrol.com, gives you the action plan for the book. So the key issue is there's three things that actually start the process. One's called, what we've discussed multiple times, expressive writing, which I think starts breaking up these circuits somehow. There's over 1,000 research papers that document that it works. It's not the solution. It does awareness and separation in one step, but it's not the solution. The third step is called active meditation, where you simply put your brain on a different sensation, which is a very basic reprogramming issue. In other words, neuroplasticity is awareness, separation, reprogramming. And so, visualization, good food, good wine, good friends, all that's reprogramming. In other words, learning a new language, that's reprogramming, right?
Right.
So, and then the final step, which has really been significant, is simply never discussing your pain, because that's where your attention is going to be, right? So it's not positive thinking, which is a way of suppressing negative thinking. It's not just mindless play to distract yourself. You literally become aware of the pain. You learn to live with the pain. Now, use the word, you incorporate pain as part of your life. Pain is just life. And so as you quit fighting the pain, your nervous system starts to change dramatically. But the key issue in this whole conversation that I can now get this out of most people if I answer the questions carefully, but it's not the physical pain that's the bigger problem, it's the anxiety. It's the mental pain that actually drives people berserk, right?
Yeah, I always like to think of it before as like so many people are stuck emotionally, but I'm a homeopath, so I always hear their story, in order to find a remedy, I have to spend a couple hours and then I hear their story, and everybody has a story. And so, They get so stuck in the emotional level of health, and it holds so many people back from getting well.
Right. So in the big picture here, the goal is not to get rid of your pain. The goal is to live with your pain. And as you quit fighting it, your body has less stress chemicals, less anxiety, right?
Yeah.
So remember, anxiety is not primarily psychological. It's that stress, it's a sensation generated by the body's stress chemicals. It's a million times stronger than the conscious brain. So key is actually just changing your body's chemistry through multiple somatic tools, of which you know very well.
For sure. Now, I want to move to the point, because I think we're at that place where I want to talk about the spiritual awareness of this journey. And I know you've described it as it could be many things for many people, but the part that maybe I'm more interested in, because I know of quite a few people who had a horrible pain syndrome and got well, and all of them, and in this particular group of people, I'm not saying it has to happen for everybody, but it's something that I'm very interested in. It seems these people that got well, they all talked about how they had to dig deep inside themselves and kind of get rid of their story, which is what you're talking about. The Hoffman process really helps people do. So I want to really check into that. But it just seems like when they've come out the other end, that they have done this work of going deep inside themselves and understanding more about their story and reconnecting with truly who they are. These are just sentences that I've heard a lot. And another thing is that they have a lot more gratitude and are more compassionate. And those are maybe three common things that I see with successful people's on successful journeys of people who started with pain. And I would like to know your experience and your thoughts on this and any recommendations for how someone who would be interested in getting or healing themselves on this, maybe becoming more awakened into compassionate and gratitude and their personal journey. I would like to know your thoughts on this with all the patients you have worked with pain, if you see this pattern also.
Well, no, you're dead on. And I actually was maybe considered doing another podcast with you on just this whole compassion versus forgiveness. So you cannot, I would belong to I won't even name the group, but it's all about compassion and about compassionate cities and putting compassion out as a word to be sought after.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is when you're angry and triggered, compassion goes out the door because, again, it's a 1,000,000-to-1 ratio. So compassion will emerge as you forgive. You actually cannot truly connect with compassion when you're angry. It's not possible because the problem with anger is you lose complete awareness. So the essence of abuse is lack of awareness. When you're angry, there's no awareness, right? You're just consumed with survival. And so the compassion emerges as you cannot really pursue this spiritual journey unless you really have a forgiveness process in place, which, by the way, is a process. I mean, there's no beginning or end point to forgiveness either. There's no beginning or end point to the spiritual journey. In other words, I do this and this happens. It's all a continuum. So the ultimate answer to chronic pain is that new language, an enjoyable life, which means the spiritual journey. So as you get your life perspective back and you don't take this so seriously, don't sweat the small stuff, etc., you honestly quit getting upset about things that don't matter. It's magical. But anger is a continental divide of chronic pain, and you're dead on. If you hear what you're saying carefully, and I can rephrase it for you, is that you are doing things that change your body's chemistry, the gratitude, the perspective, everything you just described that people talk about. And as far as the story, you can't get rid of your story. You simply understand the story. You become aware of how the story is affecting your life. And then when that particular pattern of behavior comes up, you can't fix or solve your story because that's who you are. In other words, my past was very abusive. I am a victim. I mean, that is my core pattern, is that I am truly a victim. When you're in chronic pain, you are truly a victim, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's not going to go away. You can't get rid of that. Same thing we talked about people who have lost a loved one that's close, is that people try to get over it. You're not going to get over it. That's now part of your life, is you lost a loved one. So all the efforts you do to get over it is actually, it doesn't work, because the bottom line is that that's not part of your life. And so what you do, you literally incorporate loss and pain in your past into your current daily experience, and then you keep moving forward. But you can't move forward until you've let go of the past. So you become aware of it. Whatever process you use to let go of it has to happen first before you can really enjoy your day.
Mm-hmm. So are you saying that doing the work, because anger blocks the ability to be compassionate, so just do the work and then that comes, but do you think that it can also be a little bit the other way around, where maybe working every day or doing like a compassionate journal or a gratitude journal or something, not a compassionate journal, more a gratitude journal, where you start becoming aware of all the good things that you have in your life? Do you think that can be beneficial, or do you think it's really the other way around?
No. It's necessary. So I'm hopefully trying to say this more clearly. So learning a new language, you're going to learn the Spanish classes and immerse yourself in the type of the process, right? So to learn the language of an enjoyable life, you're going to have good food, good gratitude journal, sense of curiosity, learning new skills, meeting new friends, etc. So no, you have to cultivate that, absolutely.
Okay.
But if you're going to cultivate that to fight the pain without letting go of the anger, first of all, you're unlikely to actually engage in those tools if you're angry.
Right.
Second of all, if you're using these tools to combat anger, that's not going to work. So each part of it is equally as necessary. So I just say
Got it.
50-50 for discussion's sake. So you got to let go before this cultivation of these new circuits
I see. So
happens,
yeah, so
right?
we put the gratitude and the working on compassionate into the cultivation where we're doing that along with play and enjoying good friends, good food and play along with doing gratitude and compassion work. That
Right,
now I got it.
right.
Cool.
So, because remember, going back to the whole neuroplasticity concept, remember it's awareness, separation. You have to be aware of what is. You have to create a little bit of a space, and then you reprogram. And so everything we talked about, the spiritual journey, et cetera, is the reprogramming phase. But again, if you're using, that's where I wrote a website post. I don't want to be negative here in meditation because meditation is actually one of the ultimate solutions to chronic pain. But I also wrote a website post called The Angry Meditator, is that if you're meditating to solve your pain or to fight these pathways, it doesn't work in the long picture because when all of a sudden the triggers come along and bam, you're back where you started without
Mm-hmm.
any place to go. So meditation is a extremely powerful reprogramming tool, but it doesn't work by itself to solve pain. And that's the problem. You get attached to being calm. Remember, you get attached to being out of pain. You get attached to being calm. You get attached to enjoying your life. And attachment to anything is sort of a disaster. So, I think, in DeBell's book, he says this really clearly, is that you get to experience what is in front of you. Some of it's good, some of it's terrible. And that just is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get attached to positive experiences, he points out it's like a drug. You want more and more of it. So all of a sudden you can't have enough good food, good wine, good friends because you're attached to that. So again, that's why you have to incorporate pain into your life in order to enjoy the good things at a really deep level.
True. Yeah, without the experience of good, without any bad, you wouldn't know what good is.
Right.
That's so true. And so do you think that in meditation someone could focus on, like, to make meditation or a part of their day if someone wants to meditate, it's not to replace the pain or to distract the pain, and it's not to think that it's going to heal the pain, but maybe to use the moment of silence to focus on happy times or gratitude or something like that, then it could be beneficial.
Well, I have to admit, as a surgeon, I've not done meditation retreats, but I have multiple friends now that have done the 10-day Vipassana retreats. And it's an interesting experience because a lot of times you're in postures that are uncomfortable and painful. The,
Right.
instru- and the
So
instruction
true.
is to just watch the pain. And to the person I've talked to, they say as you watch and you're with your pain, it actually physically disappears. I've heard this over and over and over again. So remember, in meditation, the goal is not to meditate away from your pain. The goal is to meditate into your pain.
Mm-hmm.
And as you
Interesting.
meditate, because remember, meditation is about connecting. Same
Right.
thing with meditation with unpleasant thoughts. Remember, you don't try to suppress the thoughts. You have the thoughts come into your body and you watch them come, you watch them go. So what you're doing, you're training your body not to react to unpleasant stimulus. In other words, that's adrenaline and cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
So as you quit reacting to these unpleasant thoughts or unpleasant physical situations, your body chemistry changes. So the key to meditation, as far as I can tell, and again, I'm embarrassed to say I'm not an expert meditator, but it seems to me it's a matter of actually being with your pain
Hmm.
and actually incorporating it right into your life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. That's helpful. And lastly, Dr. Hanscom, can you tell me what you mean when you say the last stages for you are about giving back?
Right.
So let's talk about that because that's how I would like to end it. Just what does that mean, giving back?
Well, that's a tricky one also because if I would accuse myself of being a do-gooder for years. In other words, I was trying to do good for other people to actually appease my own, back then I would call it mental pain.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually doesn't work. So what happens is that once you've gone through the process and are enjoying your life, relaxed, calm, happy, playful, whatever you want to call it, then as your attention does truly shift to other people, not to fix them, but just to be with them, to do some good in the world, your attention is completely off the pain pathways. So I think that's the ultimate solution to chronic pain is actually the spiritual journey and giving back, because you're developing an entire nervous system that's completely separated from these pain pathways. And you're now creating this whole nervous system that's enjoyable and fun and gratifying and rewarding. So yeah, the giving back, your focus is on other people instead of on you.
And for so long, as we talked about in the other episodes, people with chronic pain syndromes, then it's like a form of narcissism because you can't, how do you escape it? It's every minute and it's always on you. So that's cool that kind of ends that cycle. So that's beautiful. Cool. Thank you so much. I love your work and I'm so happy that we can discuss this and share it out to the world. And I know you're doing a lot of your own podcasts now, so maybe you can tell people again your website and how they can listen to your radio or podcast shows that you're doing. So why don't you take a minute and tell people that?
So I wrote a book, Back in Control, A Surgeon's Roadmap Out of Chronic Pain. The action plan of the book is backincontrol.com. It's a website. I update it every week on usually Sunday mornings when I get to it on time. Then every Wednesday at 5 o'clock, I post another podcast, which is anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes on different parts of the website. So I'll take a given website post, then I'll expand on it. And so that's on a weekly basis. So there's updated post each week, updated podcast every week. And I'm actually, I think you already know this, I am actually retiring in December from my surgical practice to pursue this process full time. And again, a different conversation, but probably 70% of spine surgery should not be done. And I feel spine surgery really hurts people badly. And it's become so bad the last 2 years, I just said I can't do this anymore. So I'm actually stopping my entire surgical practice to actually pursue this process full time.
That's so cool. Congratulations on that. That's great for the world.
So yeah, thanks. I'm excited. I mean, we have hundreds of people getting pain-free. It's a very self-directed process. I get emails every week from all over the country, people who I've never met or talked to, that between the book and the website, but engaging in the tools, really just have a remarkable change in their mood, their pain, their whole life experience starts to change dramatically. Then again, the family section of this. So my goal is starting in March. I have a second book. It's almost done called Do You Really Need Spine Surgery? Then the third book I'm hoping to start in March and be done by the fall is basically the impact of chronic pain on the family. In the family dynamic, we can do all these medical interventions. We can do writing relaxation tools. We can do everything we've talked about. But the family triggers wipe out everything.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. But conversely, if you can use the family dynamics to pull people out of pain, people come in, they're so excited. All of a sudden, they understand the irrational nature of this problem. They develop a structure. And the family dynamic changes within weeks. I can't even tell you how powerful it is. So I'm extremely excited about the whole discovery of the family dynamics to healing chronic pain.
That's so cool. I'm excited you're going to write a book about it too. So fantastic. And thank you so much, as always, for all the time you give and all the care you give to people in the world. It's so nice to meet a medical doctor that's truly into the true cause of illness and sickness and trying to help so many people. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the chance to talk to your audience. So I enjoy this very much.
Thanks, Dr. Hanscom. We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye.
Well, you guys, I sure hope you liked that one as much as I did. We need to all go out and practice our gratitude. Let's start a gratitude journal. Or remember what I told you about the gratitude box, where you take a piece of paper and every day you write something on it that you feel really grateful for, and you just put it in your box. And then on New Year's Eve, it's a nice time to open it up and start reading everything. Because no matter where we are in life, we all have so much to be thankful for. That's why I love the holiday season, because it starts off with Thanksgiving. That's such a great holiday. I really like to spend that day really reflecting on all that my life has given me and really just how lucky I am, and to think about all the positive things that have influenced me and that are in my life presently. And then it takes us right into the Christmas season. And to me, Christmas is not about the presents. It's really about the joyous time of year. I love to put up my mom's ornaments in my house because it brings her huge Christmas spirit energy into my house, and I love that time of year. I have so many good memories, and for those of you that don't have that out there, we can all create our new little rituals for the holiday season. So do whatever it is that makes you happy. If you feel run down and you're tired of spending all your money on presents, then just tell people that you don't want to exchange anymore, and that let's get together and have a cup of tea and a great chat, or let's go to lunch, or do something that's more meaningful if that's what it is. But whatever it is, just don't do something that doesn't feel right. So many times we do stuff out of responsibility or obligation. And as you get older, you learn not to say yes all the time. So this holiday season, make it the way you want it, okay? And remember, we have to work at this stuff. I like that Dr. Hanscom told us that we need to work on replacing, not just a negative thought, but if you're in pain, or you have a horrible headache, or you have chronic pain, or if you have anxiety. There's so many people out there struggling with anxiety. Once you start thinking about it, especially when you have anxiety about your own health, it's like you're 24 hours a day, you're just scanning your body, trying to figure out what's wrong. I mean, that's such a horrible state to be in. So when you get into these places where you feel like your mind's running away and you're getting into these vicious cycles, that's when we need to take our life back and take control. And that's what this episode is about, how to learn to put a happy thought into there. And just slowly by slowly, we don't give any energy to those old patterns of thinking, and we start putting in the new patterns of thinking, the joyous times that we've had in the past, the saying every day the things that we're grateful, and then, doing stuff for others, because really when you do stuff for others, you get it back 100 times. I'm a big believer of that. And these are just things we have to work at. And sometimes it's really hard when we're not feeling well ourselves. We feel like, well, first I have to get myself well, and then I can do that. But actually, it's the other way around. If we try to add that into our life, if we try to add the positive thoughts and the gratitude thoughts into our life when we're already in pain, it would distract us from the pain. That's the point. We want to weaken those neurological pathways. We don't want to reinforce them. So let's all work on that. Okay, you guys? Well, I think you guys know what time it is, right? Yep, it is time to say goodbye. I sure hope you enjoyed the show today, my podcast family. I've missed you, and I'm so happy to have you sitting around my table again today. All right, until next time, live life the way you want it, and think joyous thoughts, and start that gratitude box, okay, guys? Vidal has spoken. Remember, you heal with a plant-powered diet filled with fruit, homeopathy, and detoxing, of course. Peace. Be healthy. Be free. Live life.